Hello, hello, hello. Once again, we are back with another Workflow Wednesday, and I am none other than your host, Fusion Phil, over here at jitcadcam. With that being said, we're going to give this a couple of minutes to make sure everybody and anybody wants to get in here. I noticed my camera's also getting a little crazy here. Maybe I should fix this. Before we kick off today's lovely thing of where we're going to work through a common thing that I see inside of a workflow for milling, with milling and how to set up milling toolpaths and different ways to think about the process. So I'm going to go ahead and jump into this. If you guys can't hear me or if I screw something along the way, feel free to let me know in chat. I do have chat pulled over here onto my side. So let's look at what we got. So as you can see here, I have a pretty standard part. Now this part is inside the default library of Fusion 360. So I do notice I'm getting a little out on my microphone. I'm going to turn my microphone down here just a hair. You guys should still be able to see me quite well. There we go. I'm not so high and probably blowing out people's drums. But as you can see, I have my part pulled up in front of me. And as you guys all know, you've probably gotten to that point where you've made toolpaths and you've been frustrated with the of your toolpath. Now, what I like to do for most people is we're going to go, and when I train, is we're going to start with nothing more than a normal setup, right? I am going to set my Z and my X. Again, the idea of this video is not about setups. It's much more about how we're going to utilize in a much more proficient way of programming our parts. So I'm going to say a 2-inch high stock. And now you guys will understand here in a second. So I'm going to dive into the two path area of Fusion to really kick this off. So we're going to start with a facing operation. And now for any of you that have never seen my content or new to my channel, one, I appreciate you guys for being here. But as you're seeing is the very first thing I always tell people to do, to hit the OK button. Now, what is the value of that? Well, in most cases, always trying to do the right thing. And as you can see on something as simple as facing the part, it is automatically detected kind of what I've wanted it to do, right? Now, I do like to import. The important part of this is to be able to look at the color coding of my tool. And the reason I say that is because when we look at getting a path on the part, the path itself is going to tell you how to make changes. For example, we have different colors here like blue, green, yellow, and sometimes you will have red as you have red over here. So evaluating our 2D toolpaths, they tend to all look the same in this menu. So as you can see, one, we're not going to talk multi-axis, but the reason why the multi-axis tab has been moved is because in the event you guys were doing certain multi-axis things, it will affect menus in your other options. So it is a good workflow. But again, we're not too concerned about this. So we're going to look at the geometry tab. Now, the geometry tab in milling is aimed at constraining a toolpath in X and Y. So as you can see, that yellow boundary on my 2D has come through automatically from my setup to say I want to face off my stock. Now you're going to notice nothing is selected here, but if we only wanted to face the very top of this part, again, not practical. As you can see, we've now narrowed down the facing of only that area. I'm going to go ahead and hit Control Z to undo that. Now, again, our heights tab is now constraining our toolpath in Z. How, for example, we want to go from a top height of the highest, which is stock top, and we want to machine down to the highest of selected model top. Again, this is a facing toolpath. Now, I'm going to hit OK here so you guys can see this, is as you're seeing, we've looked at constraining or basically placing our blue lines within X, Y. Now, getting our blue lines in Z, you're noticing my blue lines aren't there, right? And why that's so important is because in this menu for passes is where we're seeing the color of blue for our passes. So I'm going to turn on multiple depths. And as you guys are going to see here, the whole idea is now we can see our blue lines constrained in Z by turning on multiple depths. So lastly, I'm going to go ahead and show you guys the fact that anything else is going to be red, yellow, and green, which is our linking tab. For example, you can see how our toolpath retracts up, comes back down, or we didn't want to do a vertical lead in. Again, that's that green vertical arc that we're seeing. So by zeroing that out, we now have no lead in, lead out vertical. We still have a horizontal lead in, lead out, of course, with arcs. But this is a very fundamental thing when you start to look at any of the 2D toolpaths, right? So if I was to go back and let's say, for example, I actually wanted my blue lines to start above my stock top, I can add in an offset and we're going to be outrageous with this by 1 inch. But as you can see, everything is going to jump up 1 inch. Now, this is going to cause problems because of the way my filtering and all of these properties are here. So you can see top height is 200 above, which is our stock plus 1 inch. I'm going to go ahead again is change retract the feed height. And now you can see everything kind of rolls up, or in this case, as I'm showing downwards, but now it has moved it 1 inch above. Again, the heights tab is where we're trying to set where we want blue lines. Now, a better example of controlling in a Z or an XY fashion would be as if we switched our concept over to a 2D contour. Now, if I was to pick an edge here for contour, and if I was to turn on multiple depths, what we're going to see is one, this tool is way too big. So let's go back and restart this whole procedure. So I can give you guys a very, very more real world scenario as you should do it, right? So 2D contour, I hit OK. What it's telling me is we don't have contours selected. Again, we're going to have an empty path, and because there's no contours selected. So if I click back in, it is now taking me to tell me I need to pick edges for painting, right? Now, this tool is too large for this cavity. So again, we're going to get a no passes link error. So let's pick a different tool. Again, all we're shooting for is to get a path on that part and be able to start to work with what we need. So as you guys can see, as we now have a path on that part, we're coming in and around and back out. So the very first few things I may want to do is I don't want those blue lines to start based on that exact profile that we selected. So again, is thinking about the way we're constraining in geometry XY. This is where I can edit the chain selection and I could add in an extension. Now I'm just going to go 250. As you can see, we now get these dashed lines. Again, if I go ahead and hit OK, and just like that, we've changed the constraining of the blue line, right? Good thing to remember here is it's not how many blue lines we're working with. It's not, in our Z, it's strictly in our X, right? We want to add more blue lines in our profile. We could simply go to passes, which is where our blue lines reside. And maybe I want to turn on roughing passes. And let's just say we're going to add 2 of them at 100,000 step over. And now you're seeing, again, we're adding more passes within the constraining of our XY, right? But let's look at this another way. So if we want to constrain in Z, what I'm going to do is we're going to go ahead and do a section analysis real quick here. I think this will make it a little easier to see this now in Z. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to that 2D contour. And by default, what I'm going to do is I am going to turn on multiple depths. And again, very little things make big changes inside of this software. So as you can see, we're now doing multiple depths. I'm going to go back in and edit how many blue lines, so we get a little better scenario here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to decrease my step down. So let's say I only want to do 1/4 inch step downs. And now a little precursor is we're working from stock top to our selected edge, right? So as you're seeing is we're making a lot of step downs in here, which is way more than we need for this. But again, the idea is we want to constrain our lines either in an XY plane or a Z. So again, as I'm going to go into my 2D contour, I go to my heights tab. Again, my heights tab controls my Z containment. And if I was to go down and actually say, you know what, my top height is going to be a selection, and that selection is going to be this top flat. And if I hit OK, regardless of my step down, remember, we have a 1/4 inch step down, and the distance that this actual pocket is less than that 1/4 inch that we typed in. Naturally, what we're seeing is only one step down to be calculated, and we've constrained that down in Z. Again, one final thing is maybe we want to take that and make that maximum step down, 0.05. Again, now Fusion is going to automatically do that math. Again, we've constrained our Z to keep those blue lines from a height or a top to a bottom. We've also constrained our blue lines in an XY fashion if I turn off my analyze over here. And then I've controlled how many blue lines that I've actually wanted to have or how I wanted to achieve said blue line, right? So last and final thing again is if we wanted to do some things with linking, again, we could see here is we're coming out of our part. We are still doing vertical lead in and lead out. So let me get this away from my big old bald spot on my head so you guys can see. But again, we can change our linking. We could also say, well, I'm looking at the green, yellow, orange, red lines. I would like that tool to stay down in between passes. So we can go ahead and turn that on. And again, we still have that vertical lead out, and then we stay down and we come over. We're not retracting up and down. So again, based on the way Fusion was kind of built in the color coding system, you can get information from your toolpath once you have that toolpath. But let's go ahead and shift gears now and switch off of our 2D paths into our 3D toolpaths, right? So here I have this lovely little male kind of mold or vacuum form part. And with that being said is I need to go in and create some toolpaths. So again, as we're going to switch over to manufacture, I do have some toolpaths already here, and I'm going to go ahead and remove those. But let's say, for example, I'm starting to get into my 3D paths on this part, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go for my 3D toolpaths. I'm going to go ahead and say, let's do something like a scallop toolpath. Again, I always like to hit that OK. Guys, get very familiar with hitting OK so that you can get a toolpath on the part. And as you're all seeing is I'm being prompted to give this a tool. And as you're going to see, this is now going to go out and actually calculate a toolpath basically on the whole, right? So the same rules still apply in the world of might be a little hard for you guys to see, but there is a toolpath everywhere. But if I wanted to start with the basics of one, I can't really see this tool. Really hard. I want to change the number of blue lines that I have here. It's still the same theory, right? So I go to my blue lines, which is my passes. Maybe we're actually going to do this in like 50,000 step overs. Again, I'm going to hit enter here just to speed up our workflow a little bit. And now we can see a much better toolpath on our part. Again, it probably looks a little crazy on your guys' end with the streaming and everything, but it's all still the same, right? I now only want that toolpath to work on anywhere that isn't flat, right? So in my XY, again, we go to our geometry tab. Now, some of these toolpaths are going to have some neat features. Scallop does not have one in this case. There is the ability to say ignore flat areas. Now, that's in some of the more advanced toolpaths. So in this case, I always use the mentality of working from left to right, top to bottom, right? So as you can see, we picked our tool. We move over to the right in this case. I want to select a boundary. And now with that boundary, I want the tool to work from that boundary inwards. Now, there is going to be times that you guys will work between boundaries, but the idea is still the same here, right? So we're going to start with just one boundary. And as you can see, I've now contained that toolpath XY. Again, it's not fully contained because we're not machining all the way down. We're actually sitting high on this part. Again, that would still be an XY containment on this part where I need to go in and I need to do something like contact point boundary, possibly adjust my overlap. Again, adding more and more as needed to get that toolpath where I need it to constrain, right? I'm not adding blue lines right now. I'm just changing where the boundary sits for those blue lines. Now, again, is if I wanted to set between two boundaries, same rules apply. I have my first boundary. I have my second boundary. Again, we're looking at everything being controlled in a XY kind of pattern or an XY fashion. Because we're staying between those boundaries, we now are doing our flat area, not our actual part. Now, again, I'm going to undo this here real quick so that we go back to this original part. Again, same rules apply. If we want it to filter in Z, maybe I want to go from a selected height here, or actually, let's do this a little different. Let's go highest of selected, model top, and now I know my tool is going to stick out 1.25 inches, but I only want to machine down 1 inch. Again, we can filter tool paths as you see with just our Z axis. Or in this case, maybe we actually want to go from model top as our top height minus 1 inch to model bottom. Again, we'll go to lowest, model bottom, and 0 again. And now you're going to notice we're doing just the lower section of that actual part profile. So again, all of this stuff is controllable once you get a actual toolpath on your part. This is why I think it's so valuable at the end of the day to get a path on your part. And it might not be the right path, right? It's just getting that path will tell you the information to go back and make the changes to your path so that you can make much better toolpaths in the long run, lower your cycle time, keep things like scrapping and your actual parts being, blemished or having deflection. Hey, Michael, I see you out there. Appreciate you jumping in chat for me. Guys, I've been a little under the weather. I hope everything's sounding all right. I am going to go ahead and wrap this up for today. And I do have to say is next week, we're not going to actually be doing a Workflow Wednesday because it will be Christmas Day. I don't think we're going to do another one until we get into January, probably January 8th. However, we are going to stay live on Friday between now and the new year, so we will still be having those free support Fridays moving forward. As you guys know, it's not what you know, it's who you know. You know yours truly over here at jitcadcam. Feel free to like, subscribe, follow our content, leave comments down below. We appreciate all the feedback to get you guys better content, as well as what you guys do for us by sharing our content to people in need. As always, guys, have a great rest of your day.